Κυρίες και κύριοι, καλό σας απόγευμα. Έχουμε σήμερα την τιμή να φιλοξενούμε στο στούντιο του Sigma Life έναν άνθρωπο με τεράστια εμπειρία στο χώρο της ενέργειας. Μαζί μας σήμερα είναι ο Dr. Malcolm Wilson από τον Καναδά, ο οποίος συμμετείχε στην ομάδα που πήρε το Νόμπελ Ειρήνης το 2007 μαζί με τον πρώην Αντιπρόεδρο των ΗΠΑ, τον Al Gore. Ο Dr. Wilson έχει ασχοληθεί επισταμμένα με το κεφάλαιο δέσμευση και αποθήκευση του διοξιδίου του άνθρακα. Σήμερα είναι εδώ μαζί μας για να μας μιλήσει για τους λόγους που βρίσκεται στην Κύπρο σήμερα και για το τι ακριβώς σημαίνει δέσμευση και αποθήκευση του διοξιδίου του άνθρακα. So, Dr. Wilson, what does it mean to be a Nobel contributor, Peace Prize contributor, in such a complicated subject area like climate change?
It was an exciting experience to be part of a very large group of scientists that are providing information on climate change, and more than that, on ways to resolve climate change, try to minimize any of the negative impacts that might occur. So in all, it was a recognition that the work the group was doing had value to the public. And of course, it was an honor to be a co-contributor in that, but to receive the prize along with Al Gore as the former Vice President of the United States.
It was a quite important moment then.
It was a very important moment. I mean, I've been involved in climate change activity, and particularly looking at ways to prevent it for now 25 years. And when I started, there were very few people that were doing that work. So it was really a vindication, if you like, of that I was doing the right thing, that all that time had value.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. The last 25 years, then you dedicated yourself in the area of enhanced oil recovery and carbon capture and storage. Can you describe us in simple words what exactly are the purposes of these methods and how will help the climate change?
Okay, so the basic idea is to prevent carbon dioxide from ever reaching the atmosphere. Mm-hmm. So when we convert hydrocarbons, whether that's coal or natural gas or oil, into electricity or other forms of energy, we create carbon dioxide as part of that process. So what we try to do is to find better ways to capture that CO2 and not allow it to go up the exhaust stacks of a power plant or a cement plant. And get into the atmosphere. But if we capture it, we have to do something with it. We can't just store the carbon dioxide. So we look for ways to either use it, which is enhancing oil recovery, and that has a lot of benefits. Carbon dioxide is very, very good at helping to recover more oil. But at the same time, a lot of that carbon dioxide is stored deep below the ground surface, maybe kilometers down into the subsurface. If we are just looking at storage or sequestration, depending on the term that people like to use, then again what we're doing is we're pumping that carbon dioxide a kilometer, 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers below the surface into formations that hold salt water, so water that has no value. And we can store it in those environments. And that is permanent storage. The whole purpose of this is to try to ensure that that CO2, that carbon dioxide, will never come back to the surface. And the longer it stays there, the easier that becomes. It's one of those very interesting situations where the biggest risk of anything happening is very early, and as time progresses, so the risk decreases to zero. So nature helps us to keep it down there.
From what I understand, you are in Cyprus to raise awareness around this subject. Due to the discoveries of natural gas in our country's EEZ, so there are possible storage places in the EEZ. How do you plan to do this? I mean, what contacts did you have so far?
Well, so far we've been talking to both the industry and government officials about the opportunities. If I look at what's happened in Canada, for example, as the energy industry's expanded, so emissions have increased. So I fully expect to see the same thing is happening in Cyprus. As the economy expands, as natural gas is produced, as natural gas is brought onshore, exported, used for electrical generation, so the emissions are going to go up. So that's an opportunity to build carbon capture and storage into the whole planning process in Cyprus. I believe it's an ideal situation. We don't wait and try to fit it afterwards. We build it right in.
So you believe that the timing is right?
I believe the timing's perfect. The other thing about Cyprus is it's an island, so it's surrounded by water. And so there's a possibility of even exporting carbon dioxide for use in other countries by ship. So I think it's something that needs to be looked at, and the country made ready at least to be able to capture that carbon dioxide and either store it within the subsurface in 20 years or 30 years, maybe in some of those early gas reservoirs, or, as I say, to actually export it to other countries.
Now, speaking from an international point of view, carbon capture and storage is not widely used so far. What are the expectations from these methods in the near future?
I think that we're seeing a very slow progress towards carbon capture and storage, and really the biggest part of it is the capture side, because there are many misleading claims out there about costs and so on. But what we are seeing now are a number of projects at the commercial scale that are moving ahead, and we'll see those starting up within the next 6 months to a year.
Okay, so we will have more results on the actual process in the next.
Exactly,
yeah.
And that's critical. It's one thing to have a very small project and say it works, but what we really need to do is to understand the costs.
So at a larger scale.
At a large scale. So one of the projects, well, two of the projects are in Canada. Both of those will capture about 1 million tons of CO2 a year. So they're not huge, but they're large projects, and they'll teach us a lot.
Can you tell us a few words about the procedure that we follow to capture and store the carbon dioxide?
Yeah, basically what we do is when those exhaust gases come off, and everybody I think is familiar with the big exhaust stacks, the smoke stacks, if you like, on electrical power stations and other industrial facilities. So what we do is, instead of pushing those exhaust gases up the stack, we take it to a capture unit, remove the carbon dioxide, and then release the rest of the gas, which is essentially nitrogen, which is 70% of the atmosphere anyway. Then that carbon dioxide is dried and compressed. Then goes into
what kind of form is that?
Okay, sorry. It's so the carbon dioxide comes from the capture area as a gas. Before we put it underground or move it by pipeline, we have to compress it to a liquid.
Okay.
So those pressures are fairly high to very high. As a liquid, it can then be put into a pipeline and moved to a storage site or used for oil recovery. It can also be moved by ship. So it's possible to cool the CO2 and take it to a liquid, very much like liquefied natural gas, only it's warmer. It's not as cold as
so
natural gas.
So there are safety issues as well, I understand.
There are actually very few safety issues. Pipelines have been used for decades with very good success, very low problem issues associated with them. And if methane leaks natural gas, it can catch fire and cause an explosion or at least a flame.
Yeah.
With carbon dioxide, of course, nothing happens. It won't burn, and so long as nobody is right on top of the problem, it's not in the least bit dangerous. And on top of which, the pipelines have safety equipment every 20 kilometers or so. So even if there is a leak, not much can leak out.
Yeah.
When it goes into the ground, as I say, it goes down into the ground several kilometers. And nature actually helps us keep the liquid carbon dioxide in the ground. So there are a lot of natural processes that help to prevent it leaking out. So even in extreme circumstances, which are very unlikely to happen, the actual leakage of carbon dioxide would be very, very small and very slow. So not a problem.
Are there any possible implications? And I know that there are fears that storing the carbon in undersea deposits could lead to seismic activity or anything else.
There is always the risk of injecting anything into the subsurface that it could cause some seismic activity. In fact, I would say that it will cause some seismic activity. But in most cases, that activity is so minute that we only know it's happening because we have very, very sensitive equipment buried deep in the subsurface. There have been a few instances with water injection for water disposal that minor earthquakes have occurred that have been felt but haven't caused any damage. And I would even go one step further and say that these very small seismic events are actually safety measures. The Earth is very active, and if we can release the energy that builds up in the ground with very, very tiny movements, it actually makes the risk of a large earthquake smaller. So it's really not a major issue that needs to be considered. Naturally, we would not try to put carbon dioxide in dangerous areas such as the Ring of Fire around the Pacific Ocean, for example.
Yeah. Why should Cyprus use this method, in your opinion?
I think it's not a case of why Cyprus. It's a case that we all have to do something. So climate change, I believe that climate change is occurring, and that we're just entering that phase where changes could become serious if we're not careful. So I think it's incumbent upon all of us to look for opportunities to capture that CO2 or to reduce our production of it. So it's not just carbon dioxide capture and storage. It's renewable energy, windmills, solar, bioenergy. It's also energy efficiency.
So this applies to the whole tries, let's say, to save the planet.
As they say, we're all on this spaceship together, and we need to preserve it.
You said something about the cost before. What is the cost of such a project?
That's one of the questions we're really trying to answer. So at the moment, we only have a rough idea of what the costs are because some of these projects are being built. So,
are there any estimations though?
So, yeah, those estimations are very broad.
Okay.
It depends on where you are, how much labor costs, how much capital costs. So in Saskatchewan, we're looking at probably something less than $50 a ton for carbon dioxide. So what's that? 30 euros a ton, 30 to 35 euros. But that's one unique situation. However, when that's built, we'll understand a lot more about how to reduce those costs. So that project will bear a lot of the cost of being first, but everybody else will benefit.
Do you think that it's easy to ensure the necessary political and economic support for such projects? I mean, we know how politics works when it comes to science.
I think that the biggest problem we face at the moment is politics. And I think that there are a lot of politicians out there that really don't believe what's happening. I also think that we're being a bit unfair to politicians as well. I'm not sure they're getting good information. So I believe there's a lot of misinformation out there around the costs.
There are people that still do not believe that the climate change is taking place.
There's that part of it, and as I say, there's also, if you don't want to do it, then you look for some of the numbers that support why it shouldn't be done, as opposed to looking for numbers that support why it should be done. And because we're dealing with big projects, it looks like a lot of money. But the volumes of carbon dioxide that can be captured are also very large. So on a 1 ton basis or a 1 kilogram basis, the numbers are not too bad, and they may be quite a bit cheaper than other alternatives. I use the example at home where my wife and I had to buy a new washing machine. So we bought a top of the line, front load, low water, low energy washing machine. But on a per kilogram of CO2 saved, it's a lot more expensive for us to do it with a washing machine than it is for our electrical utility to do it in bulk. Mm-hmm. So I think we have to be very careful how we compare numbers.
Mm-hmm. I know that you have a cooperation with a company based in Cyprus, that's Techmore Oil and Gas Advisory Services. How did that happen, and what is the goal of this cooperation?
So Techmore is a company that provides IT solutions to the oil industry, particularly in the Gulf of Mexico region of the United States. So solutions for offshore platforms and ensuring effective management of information. One of my very close friends and colleagues in Saskatchewan in Canada works closely with Techmore in the United States, and she was able to bring us together. So Techmore has a goal of moving back to Cyprus, of providing more into the economy and working in Cyprus. My background with carbon dioxide capture and storage, energy policy, looked like a good fit with Techmore as Techmore moves back to Cyprus. Mm-hmm. So we were able to team up and look to see what opportunities are here for an expansion of the office. So more people working here, training people in Cyprus to do that work. So I think it's a really exciting opportunity, and I'm certainly pleased to be part of it.
Mm-hmm. Lastly, what are your impressions so far on the developments in the Cyprus EEZ? I mean, do you think that Cyprus has a role to play in the international gas market?
I think so. Obviously, we need to see more gas found and proven up. So we know that Noble and its partners have started to develop a quite significant reserve. We hope that as they really learn more about that reserve, it turns out to be bigger. Also hope that the other companies that are going to be exploring in the zone again will find more gas. Under those circumstances, and there's every reason to believe they will, of course, because of extensions from the Israeli zone and so on. Then I think Cyprus has a role to play, hopefully within the European zone to begin with, given the issues with Russia and so on, but part of a global picture. And you know, Canada's long been part of the oil and gas scene, so it's welcoming Cyprus into the club, if you like, mm-hmm. and hoping that Cyprus can play a significant role.
I know that you keep in touch with students, especially university students that are will be part of the industry the next year. So, did you have any contacts in Cyprus? I know you had a presentation in University of Cyprus.
That's coming on Monday.
Oh, okay.
At the university, but we'll be making contacts at the university, mm-hmm. and looking for opportunities. And what I really hope comes out of that presentation is that we can excite students and have them become part of the energy area, and particularly the energy and environment area, and part of carbon capture and storage, so that as Techmore expands in Cyprus, so we'll have students coming out from the university that are ready to work in the industry, ready to work for and with Techmore.
We have a high rate unemployment here in Cyprus right now, so it's important to see how specialists in the area think about the future of the area of energy.
Not only are we looking at some of the issues and some of the opportunities in carbon capture and storage, and making sure that's planned in, bringing external expertise in from places that have got a long experience with the oil industry, and using that experience to train young people here in Cyprus. But we also think that economic development, economic diversification is extremely important. And so with that gas production, what can happen? It can be used to generate electricity. It can be used to make cement, but it can be used for other purposes too. We know that Cyprus is looking at liquefied natural gas and export of liquefied natural gas. So that's good. That's one industrial development. We also think that there are new technologies that are being tested now that look very attractive for turning natural gas into things like gasoline, diesel, jet fuel. So, you know, we'd like to see at least an investigation of Cyprus starting to produce its own transportation fuels again. It's been a long time since the refinery closed. So these are new job opportunities. So we'd like to see that kind of investigation and look at the broader economic opportunities that natural gas brings to the country.
Okay.
And I think this is a good time for young people to become involved. Again, it's the same as making sure that the planning is in place for carbon capture and storage. The industry is starting. The opportunities will build over the next few years. So I think it's for university students now and over the next few years, there are some very exciting opportunities.
Dr. Wilson, thanks a lot for being with us this afternoon. Wish you all the best for the coming years. We will wait for the results of these projects.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for having my colleagues here as well.
Thank you. Ευχαριστούμε κυρίες και κύριοι που μας παρακολουθήσατε.